No te vayas, no me dejes. Quédate conmigo un ratito más. No quiero llorar, pero no aguanto. Es que yo te amo tanto, tanto. No puedo dormir si vos te vas.
Cochabamba, the city of eternal spring, is a place with many contrasts. The city is divided into two distinct parts, La Zona Sur y La Zona Norte. In Cochabamba, if you cross Avenida Heroínas to the south, you've just entered La Zona Sur, the poorest region of the city. Deforestation and water shortages are two major issues in this zone. As a friend and coworker told me, it is also a very culturally rich community, hungry for change and the readiness to mobilize and better their local environment through reforestation. Most of us lived with our host families in La Zona Norte, the wealthier half of the city. I think we all had a very different expectation of our living situations, and as a result were surprised to find all the trappings of typical North American culture in our grasp. My family lived in a big 3-story house, had a television and computer, and saw themselves as completely separate from the indigenous Bolivians who mainly spoke Quechua. Cochabamba forced me to rethink the otherness in which Americans will see the third world, and how this perception can distract us from the very same haves and have-nots that exist within our own country. In San Francisco, you only have to walk a couple blocks to get from Union Square to the Tenderloin.
Although Cochabamba is in the center of Bolivia, it has many Western-inspired places, the theaters and the cafes. During my stay in Bolivia, I had the opportunity to attend several theater performances. The Theater Acha, the main city theater, is decorated in a very European-style manner, with angels around the stage and flowers surrounding the balconies overviewing the stage. However, the performers on stage were nowhere European-inspired. My first concert was Los Masis, a group of 7 men who desired to keep their indigenous Bolivian culture alive. Their music, like the other groups I heard, was a combination of modern tones and traditional Bolivian melodies. Experiencing this infusion of Western and indigenous aspects was not abnormal. All around the city, cafes served cappuccinos and espressos. However, they did stay true to their Bolivian roots by serving api, a purple hot corn drink, and empanadas, a traditional cheese-filled pastry. This is what I most admired about this country, their hospitality and the ways in which they have preserved their culture.
I lived and worked in the somewhat suburban, somewhat rural, and very vibrant area of Sacaba, a district just outside of Cochabamba. While I walked the roads to work every day, I would pass by small houses on large plots of lands, and a few condos under construction. I would be passed by several indigenous women walking their cows and goats, and families riding the buses to school with their children. Many households turned their garages into small restaurants and tiendas, but most of these restaurants and tiendas were on the same boulevard by the public plaza of Quintanilla. My water cooperative was in the middle of this street. The cooperative was comprised of locals who frequently stepped outside to chat with their friends and neighbors throughout the day. For the Day of Independence, nearly 1,000 Bolivians marched down the street, including those from my own cooperative. The streets were filled with food vendors, games, and trinkets. It was a place for feasts, celebrations, and dancing. My most valuable work and play happened right here in the Plaza Quintanilla of Sacaba.
Not all of us experienced the same with our host families, but we all think that it was an important part of our summer in Cochabamba. One thing that was great was the fact that we all had the chance to go to each other's homes and bond with the families hosting other interns, whether it be over dinner or to celebrate an intern's birthday, or to go to events where members of the families participated in. Whatever the occasion, the families would always welcome us into their home with open arms. My overall experience in Cochabamba would have not been complete if it weren't for the great bond that I had with my host family. We would have long chats over lunch and dinner. They would take me to different places to get to know Cochabamba better. My brothers and sister introduced me to all of their friends, and we would hang out after work or school and on weekends. But most importantly, I got to feel like I was actually a part of their family because of how loving and how attentive they are, and for that, I am very grateful.
When you walk through the streets of Cochabamba, you come across a sense of salient vibrancy. You see colorful Andean textiles along with other handcrafted goods being sold in various markets or on the backs of cholitos who are carrying their goods in the loud and bustling streets. You see street art and graffiti with poignant political messages, or messages of proclaimed love. You hear Andean folk or loud cumbia music blasting from taxi cars and shops. You encounter people who are welcoming and approachable, especially when they spot a lost or puzzled-looking tourist. One must not forget to mention that once early afternoon rolls around, be prepared to indulge in a rich and savory meal that will leave you feeling filled to maximum capacity. From steamy, hot bowls of soup to a plate filled with a mound of rice and potatoes, topped with a generous portion of meat and a dollop of yakwa, Cochabambinos pride themselves on their traditional dishes. The caring nature and generosity of Cochabamba is embedded in the culture.
My time spent in Cochabamba made me think more about international development and how this topic is framed. Apart from the Sarlo class, third world countries have been discussed primarily in terms of deficits, and this lens has implications for the type of development that takes place in these countries. Despite the experience I have working with asset-based community development, I still had jaded expectations for what I would experience in Bolivia, because of how I was taught to view the differences between first and third world. I compared life there to life in the United States, and what I learned was to think of differences not as better or worse, but just to accept them as different. This helped me to begin seeing the assets that constantly surrounded me in Cochabamba, and I came back a better advocate and with a better sense of what it means to build trust within a community.